Deadlift, I would say, is the number one thing. You know, any kind of hinge and with that sort of load pulling from the ground, I think, or you know, elevated if there's a movement restriction or something like that, I think is going to be the best. I used to think that the back squat was something I do to the day I died, and then deadlift secondary. But you know, as I started to think about it, we're going to be utilizing our hips to pick things up off of the floor and move things long after our knees blow out. So I feel like at this stage, deadlifting might be most transferable, right? So we're looking at hip dominant deadlift, single arm row, carry anything, okay? Like carries are a staple in my program. You're probably going to be carrying something 4 to 5 times a day if you're training, a week if you're training with me.
So straight up farmer's carry.
Yes,
kind of thing.
farmer's carry. As many variations as are safe, you know, for the person's movement quality. But in my opinion, that's going to be the single most transferable thing we can do in the gym, especially as a New Yorker. When are you not carrying something?
Hello and welcome back to another video. It's Mike Mutzel here. As always, thanks so much for showing up, for tuning in, for subscribing. If you're into balancing blood sugar, learning exercises that will help your body become more fat adapted, and possibly improving your body's blood sugar regulation and slowing down the aging process, this is the interview for you. Ed Napper really he brings the house. He shares a lot of cutting edge information about improving our body's musculoskeletal system and musculoskeletal health through exercise. As you saw in the intro, he's very ripped, he's very physically fit, but you know, he hasn't been doing this for 20, 30 years. He's been doing this for about 5 years, and he's been able to put on a lot of muscle mass and has built up a major clientele in the downtown New York City area in Manhattan, and is one of Manhattan's leading leading personal trainers. And he shares a lot of clients and patients with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. And actually, Dr. Gabrielle, I want to thank her. She introduced Ed and I. As you know, she was on the podcast back in September. The interview, I'll put it here and in the show notes below, has already gotten some 50,000 views. She's been very popular for her ability to articulate and help us better understand the whole field of muscle protein synthesis and mTOR and amino acids and much more. So thank you, Gabrielle. And you know, today we're going to talk all about muscle and squatting and deadlifting and movements that can help you build and maintain lean muscle mass, and having a good night's sleep is part and parcel with that whole process, and Somnifix can help facilitate that. Why? What helps to retrain your body to breathe through your nose while you're sleeping. As you may have known or may have heard me say many times before, when you're breathing through your mouth while you're sleeping, your tongue can collapse in your airway, and that can cause what's known as sleep disordered breathing, which can antagonize your sleep processes and kind of promote or de-escalate deep phases of REM sleep and other deep sleep cycles. So that's where Somnifix comes in. It's a very hypoallergenic, clinically studied mouth tape that will prevent sleep disordered breathing and will help you to foster and relearn how to breathe through your nose. Last but not least, I do want to let you guys know that while Ed is very physically fit, very healthy, he lifts a lot of weights, he's not necessarily a keto athlete. And you might be like, well, Mike, you covered the ketogenic diet at length. You've interviewed all these people. And after reading this book, Decisive by Dan and Chip Heath, I've realized that not everyone has to be a keto athlete or a high carb athlete or a vegan athlete or a carnivorous diet person. There's multiple ways to figure out how to improve this body, this piece of flesh that we call the human being. I think it's important that you widen your options, that you consider the opposite. In this book, they talk a lot about the confirmation bias and how most people, including yourself and probably me and many others, what we do is we tend to seek out information that confirms what we already know. We listen to the same music. We go to the same 5 restaurants. We watch the same 3 or 4 YouTube channels, right? We're constantly seeking to confirm what we already know. So my challenge to you is to consider the opposite, to be a little bit more open-minded. And this book will help you to better understand how widening our options, considering the opposite, considering instead of this or that, what about this and that? What about mostly keto with a dash of carbohydrates? And I personally have found while I've been hardcore keto for the past 3 years, I found that when I add in more carbohydrates, particularly on days where I'm squatting or deadlifting or doing pull-ups, which we're gonna talk about a lot in this video, it enhances my performance. So I want you to just be aware of that you don't always have to be keto, or you don't always have to be high carb, or you don't always have to be a carnivore. You can change things up and that will actually be good for your body instead of deleterious. So I'm gonna stop rambling. Let's dive into it with Ed Napper.
Hey friends, it's Mike with High Intensity Health. Thanks for showing up and being here. I'm very excited to be with Ed Napper here. And we're gonna talk about personal training and medicine and how exercise is medicine. So Ed, you're working with a lot of clients and kind of cross-referencing, is that the right word? I don't know, but working with the doctor's patients as well.
Right.
Back and forth. So a lot of people think, oh, I go to the gym, I don't need to go to the doctor, or I go to the doctor, and the doc kind of gives me some unspecific exercise plans.
Right.
You know, so talk about like where you start with someone who has maybe diabetes and metabolic disease, wants to lose weight, coming from the Ash Center. Like, where do we kind of personalize this?
So initially, we start with G and I, or whoever's treating at the Ash Center, because we have a couple of doctors there. We start there and we figure out what's going to be a contraindication, immediately. What are we not going to do, with this person? Because ideally, we are here to collectively make the patient better, right? So we don't want to have any like signals crossed in terms of how we plan to treat the situation. Then we want to identify the priorities, right? Like, what do we need to address today, right? To get this person, where they want to be in the next 5 years. Is it sleep first? Is it nutritional practices? Is it a day-to-day scheduling management kind of thing? Or is it just information? Or maybe it's accountability, right? Because if I were to come and see you and you said, well, you just need to go work out. Okay, so I might just drag myself in there 10 to 15 minutes a day, get on the elliptical, watch a little TV at your local, fitness chain, and go home and think that that's enough, However, if you meet up with someone and you are actually accountable to that person, you might be more apt to come on in on a more consistent basis.
And really push it.
And really push it, which is essentially what it takes, because I think we all know, like, at this stage, we have to work at very specific percentages and intensities, when we're in these gyms to get the desired result, like to put it in its most simplest terms, the body needs to be stimulated, right? So we can't just roll the dice on what that stimulus is and hope that, the outcome is going to be what we want. Like, it's something that needs to be specific and directed. And it helps if it's based on science, too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Love that.
So I think that in that vein, like the right personal trainer, coach, whatever someone's labeling themselves these days, helper, Sherpa, is key, to the 360 approach that we're trying to take, with each and every patient.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I love so many facets of that, the 360 approach, but also making it the stimulus specific.
Absolutely.
So most people want to maintain lean muscle mass and burn fat, right? So what? Obviously it's all individual, right? Where
always.
they're at and stuff like that.
Always.
But if we can talk like high hit rate, 80% of the population, where do you like to start with them to add that stimulus?
So let's just say, we're saying healthy body, no injuries, just I need to get my life together.
Summer's kind of thing. I got to do it.
Summer kind of thing. So I start them with more hip dominant body weight movements, because the idea is, if you can't handle your body weight, why would I give you something external? So that's what we take, what's called that foundational period, and address. Body weight control. We look at expanding cardiovascular output, to some degree. I don't want to say correcting, I just want to say addressing imbalances. We're always going to have some type of imbalance, addressing imbalances and just getting the client to move. So depending on the general health of the client, I won't load them for a while. Externally anyway.
2 months, 3 months, what are you talking?
Yeah, maybe 60 days,
okay,
something like that,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And that's when I'll start to, add external load, right? Because, we have so many other things before that. We have isometric contractions, which work great and are scientifically proven to spark growth at the right intensity, right? And we also can create enough acidity to spark growth through body weight movement as well. So, someone may have a question about it or a concern about it in the beginning, but if you have, the data or the information to sort of break it down and explain to them, then, people generally have no problem not starting with external weight, right? Because again, like that's that whole, train of thought thing that we're trying to, combat, where it's like, everything doesn't work for everybody, So we think instinctively we need to come in to facilities and gyms and just pick up the heaviest weight. And I don't think that that's right in the beginning.
Yeah. For a lot of people, they can injure themselves quickly, especially if they don't have the right form.
Oh, forget about it, So it's like Joe Schmo rolling off the couch and like, oh, I'm going to go crush it today. Like, dude, no, you're going to crush yourself. That's the only thing that's going to be crushed, you know? And most scientific data is based on a 70% 1RM anyway. So you don't really find a lot of the results-driven stuff needing to be in that 85 to 90% threshold, especially for general population.
Right.
Like there's a saying, a famous strength coach in this that's really respected in this industry. He says, look, the first 90 days, anything will work. And it's kind of true. It's like, dude, you haven't done anything since your high school football days. You're a 45 to 50-year-old executive now. Like, dude, all you have to do is get consistent, come in here for 2, 4, 6 weeks under the direction of someone that's giving you the proper intensity, proper rep schemes, and proper percentages, and you're going to be fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what like that first 60 days of someone coming in like inexperienced and needing to work looks like.
Hey, it's me again with a brief announcement from our friends at Health IQ. I'm super excited to have them as a sponsor of this podcast and many other episodes because they understand and recognize that the absence of disease does not equate health. You see, when you embark on lifestyle change, when you meditate, when you exercise, when you lift weights, when you eat a low-carb ketogenic style diet, you reduce your risk of heart disease, of cancer, of autoimmunity. And so you shouldn't have to pay as much for your life insurance compared to people that don't embark on these positive lifestyle changes. Health IQ gets it, they acknowledge that, and they want to recognize and reward that health-promoting behavior by helping you save money on your life insurance premiums. You can get a free quote, see if you qualify, and help support the podcast and Health IQ's mission of the scientific wellness revolution. Please go to healthiq.com/HIH to get a free quote and see if you qualify. Again, that's healthiq.com/HIH. Let's dive back into the show.
So hip dominant movements, so squats, deadlifts, what are some other examples of?
Squat, well, deadlift, I would say is the number one thing, any kind of hinge and with that sort of load pulling from the ground, I think, or, elevated if there's a movement restriction or something like that, I think is going to be the best. I used to think that the back squat was something I'd do to the day I died. And then deadlift secondary. But, as I started to think about it, we're going to be utilizing our hips to pick things up off of the floor and move things long after our knees blow out. So I feel like at this stage, deadlifting might be most transferable, right? So we're looking at hip dominant deadlift, single arm row, carry anything, okay? Like carries are a staple in my program. You're probably going to be carrying something 4 to 5 times a day if you're training, a week if you're training with me.
So straight up farmer's carry.
Yes,
kind of thing.
farmer's carry. As many variations as are safe, for the person's movement quality. But in my opinion, that's going to be the most single most transferable thing we can do in the gym, especially as a New Yorker. When are you not carrying something?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what it is, you know? So there are clients or, you know, patients I've worked with, and it didn't even dawn on them until 6 months later. I get a call from a housewife or someone else, and they're just like, hey Ed, you're not gonna believe this. Like, now I know why we do those carries all the time. I was going to the store, I had to pick up some paint, and I immediately adjusted myself, and instead of having them delivered, I just walked home and it was fine. I'm like, yeah, that's the reason why, you know, we do those boring things in the gym, you know?
Awesome.
So I would say goblet squat specifically for the squat variations when they're coming in, right? Because that's where we load it anterior. It could be anything. It could be a kettlebell. It could be a bag. It can be a dumbbell. It can be any of that stuff, right? As opposed to something like the back squat or something like that. We call that a neurologically stupid movement. But I love the back squat. Yeah, I love the back squat. But I would, for general population, I tend to, after the bodyweight squat, we go right into a goblet squat. Right?
Is it because the muscles are not strong enough, the form's not there? What's...
Yeah, it's a lot of trouble to work around, okay? And I think coaching and teaching the deadlift and hip hinge is going to be more beneficial.
Cool.
So when you talk about risk versus reward, do we want to be loading up the back that much across, you know, the span of a week or 2 or 3? I choose not to. Some people might, but I choose not to, and I find it works better that way. So I'd much rather load your anterior in some sort of goblet squat variation and work the deadlift as the primary, you know, lower body, but really full body specific movement.
That's awesome. What about like the trap bar versus just Romanian bar? Do you start people?
I like the trap bar for, again, general population. There is a greater, there's more of an equal weight distribution on the joints when you use a trap bar. So again, we're right back to risk versus reward. You know, you're a banker, dude. Like, you don't need something loaded up on a barbell just because you think that's the thing to do. You know, there's more risk there. We don't need that. Like, we need you strong and viral throughout the day. You know, not in a wheelchair in 10 years because you're taking like risks that you don't need.
Yeah.
You know? So again, like that is why it's important. Like when you go into the gyms, like the movement isn't wrong. It's just you need to be a bit more specific, you know, with it. The medical community, in my very short experience, I mean, you can't really be a great doctor and an amazing strength coach. So I'm not faulting the medical community for not, you know, exactly specifying this stuff in the gym, but, you know, anybody's going to say, hey, just, you know, go to the gym and strengthen this and that and it'll be good.
Now you HIIT training, that's how you get your heart rate up.
Yeah. And that's the general advice. And again, I don't think you can be both. So I'm not faulting the community. But what I am saying is, like, there are better ways to do it once you get on the premises, and in comes, you know, some sort of fitness professional like that will show you the difference and why you don't need a barbell versus a trap bar. Yeah. You know, based on your profession. Yeah. You see what I mean?
Yeah. No, I do. Really good stuff.
So I think that I prefer the trap bar over the barbell for deadlift.
Brilliant.
You know, though I don't use it, so it's kind of like hypocritical, but what am I going to do?
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, on me, you know, like I use a barbell.
Right. For me. But you're lifting all the time. You've been doing it. You're very fit.
Right, for a little while, you know, so, and that's where I started as well, you know, so, you know, it's a sort of a different thing, you know. But if I'm responsible, then we're gonna go minimal risk and try and get like a maximal return on that physical investment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk about upper body stuff. So, you know, pulling, pull-ups, rows, presses.
Pull-ups. Oh my goodness, it's a movement near and dear to my heart. I don't think people do enough of them. And the biggest reason you get is because it's hard, But I think that is going to be, like, if I had the king of all posterior movements, I'd put deadlift there, and then right after that I'd put the pull-up, So I think everybody, where there are no injuries, or where they are capable of learning and improving in a safe manner, should be working on the pull-up or some variation. There are a million variations to build up to, you know? So yeah, pull-up is definitely going to be very high, number one on that priority list for the upper body.
And the variation, so a lot of people use bands, like under the knee, under the foot.
Bands under the knee, bands under the foot. They have the assisted pull-up machines, right, in most facilities, and you could even dial it back to what we call inverted row. Start there, and move up accordingly. Like,
so if you come to TR, you want to just demonstrate just real quick. I mean, we don't have to get up, but
yeah. So the inverted row, the body. Another name for the inverted row is called a plank pull as well. So the body would be straight, just like it is in a plank. Yeah. Except we have that bar here, and you're going to be pulling your chest into the bar each time. So we're moving through that full range of motion at a regressed, body position. So there are ways to build up to it as well, But the bands, some of them go up to, 100 pounds, like something like that. So any of those things will work. There's a jumping pull-up, where you focus on the eccentric part of the contraction. We know what eccentric movement does for the muscle. So you're going to have like an equal, if not better benefit, just working that variation. So I think that there are many different ways to go about it, Again, it's just about like these kind of partnerships, where it's like, we could fix this person's posture, if we just, do this, or we address it, in this manner,
Right. That's brilliant. How many days a week? I mean, again, everything's specific and individual and stuff like that, but can you train the back twice a week?
Yes, you can. Okay. I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Is that what you do personally?
I do personally. It depends on what I'm focusing on at the time. Okay. For example, I wanted, it was a month out, and I wanted bigger legs, right? So in that cycle, that gave me 2 to 3 days where I was working at different intensities on the posterior and lower body, more than other things, because I never just attempt to isolate. I think isolation is just a weird term, at this stage, especially with so much data suggesting and supporting that, like, the human body we need to treat it like an integrated tool. Like, you could pay more attention to, one part of the body, right? But you're never really training anything in isolation, And that one part of the body will respond to the stimulus you're shooting into it. So I try to stay away from that, but and instead use a primary mover kind of thing. And there was a month where I was just looking to build my wheels, as we call them. Yeah. And during that month, that was the priority. So within a week, I was doing some form of squat deadlift variation 3 days. Wow. And then for my long duration cardiovascular work, I choose something that was lower body dominant, like a Stairmaster, and do that at a very low intensity. So everything was tied in, to that one goal, and that was to build a bigger
legs, bigger quads. Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, you mentioned cardio there. I think that's important because there's we talked a little bit about resistance training and stuff, but if we were to say, okay, ideally someone has been relatively inactive, wants to optimize their organ of longevity, aka muscle, how many days a week should we be doing resistance training and then aerobics?
I'd say some form of resistance training. I'd start with 3 to 4 days out of the week doing some form of resistance training, and 2 days aerobics. Those aerobics, so how we structure our day in training, our sessions there's basically about 10 minutes of high intensity work, intervals or, any things along that line at the end of the session or somewhere built in. Or it could be an interval weight session as well,
a superset kind of thing.
Where that's the entire thing, So we got sprints built in there. Those 2 days would be looked at as, like, say, a recovery kind of day. And for me, I have an aerobic preference. So many wonderful things happen in the aerobic system. Like, why in the world would I not want to be efficient in that? Now, if we go into transferability to the people that I train, I mean, listen, most of them are doing this all day, What system are we in right now?
Right.
So the idea is to get these people operating better at what they actually do. We use the gym as a place and a tool to do that. So that's another reason, another case for specificity, right?
Yeah.
You're a lawyer. I don't need to be training you like a power lifter. That's not going to help you litigate longer. That's not going to help you have a long day at work and then get home and want to run around with the kids. Like, that's not going to help you, So aerobic days might.
Yeah.
Power endurance, right? Intervals where we effectively put out, stop, recover, put out again, stop, recover, put out again. Like, that's what we're doing. Humans, we're doing all day, regardless of what your job is. You could be working the back of McDonald's. You're flipping, recover, sort of thing. So again, specificity, with that. So that is the case I generally make for aerobic work. People always think cardio is going to take away from your strength gains. And I'm just like, do you know how much on the tip of mass you have to have accumulated for cardio to affect you? Like, most are not even close. I don't even think I'm close, dude.
So don't even worry about that. The loss of muscle mass associated with cardio.
No. At the appropriate percentage and time, So, but again, it's like we talked about, specificity is going to be king, Like, I personally do enough aerobic work. Some would consider it excessive some days, right? Because I have cardiovascular issues in my family, So my mother passed away. She had a heart attack at 49. My grandmother had 3 strokes, right? I am genetically predisposed, to a lot of this stuff, So it is important for me to address the cardiovascular, part of my life as well, for those reasons alone.
Right. Going down to that transferability and specificity that we're talking about.
Right.
Have a purpose.
Right. Yeah. So, sometimes some people will see me post, I had a 2-hour, session at this intensity of aerobic stuff. And somebody, oh my God, that's great. And it's like, no, dude, it's not great, but it's like what I have to do, for me, So that's the case I generally make for aerobic work and the cardiovascular system. A lot of people don't like it, but if you can explain it to them in those terms, and then show them and tell them what the benefit's going to be, like, most will do it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. A lot of female clients I work with more on the nutrition side say, before I get into weights, I want to balance my hormones, I want to get all that fine-tuned. What would you say to that? And kind of the thing that comes to mind is like the hormonal benefit associated with exercise, the feedback that correctivism, if you will, that may have on their hormone system. Have you kind of seen that?
Well, I agree with that to some degree. I think, yes, weightlifting is going to done correctly, will have a good impact on the hormonal system. But if it's out of whack already, and other things are also, you have other, mitigating circumstances, like, I would be thinking hard, about adding weights and resistance to that situation, before you got, like, your endocrine function under control. Yeah. So that I kind of agree with, and, Dr. Lyon, and they'll tell you, So, I totally understand that being the priority. So we'd have to move accordingly on a case-by-case basis in terms of, how we go forward with physical training, you know, because, you know, look, it may require you being a little bit less frequent in that first 60 to 90 days, you know. It may require you not going above a percentage, or it may restrict us in some movements, you know, or you may not be able to train at all if you can't get to sleep, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So like there are so many circumstances in the day-to-day surrounding, in my short experience, surrounding people that have I'd say, I guess it's one, right? Because if one thing's off in that endocrine system, everything's going to be, you know, a little bit off. So most people having those disruptions, like that should certainly be the priority.
Sleep, part of it, or the whole thing?
Certainly.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah.
First. I mean, look, I find it interesting at this point that there are those of us that are actually having to tell people, you need to go to sleep, you need to drink water, you need to get up and move and stretch a little bit, and that's all you need to do right now. You know, I find it, and it dawned on me the other day because I'm working with a gentleman, and he comes in every week. Mind you, this guy, it's a multi-million-dollar company. Was kind of on the decline in terms of, you know, energy and everything like that before we met. And he comes in and he's like, dude, like sleeping is like the best thing ever. Like, I don't even know what to tell people. Like, people ask me what I'm doing and I tell them, like, you know, I met this guy and he's, you know, explained to me about sleep and I started doing it. So people are like, so he told you to go to sleep. Is he really a great guy? So I find it interesting that that is the problem solver, like the primary right now. And we've evolved so much. When I was thinking about this the other day, this is what I came up with. We've evolved so much as a species and society that we actually have to go over the science associated with sleep to get people to adhere to something that should probably be really basic. You know, like there's some data out there that suggests that it takes the brain 7 hours a night of sleep just to completely detoxify from the toxins we come into contact with, right? I call bullshit on that. Like, I think it should be more in certain cities. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just explaining that to someone, you know, it's, oh wow, so that's why I need to sleep. You know, so it's interesting, you know, now, you know, with those things, sleep, water, and a little bit of movement, you know, but those are things as a species we've always needed.
Right.
And I don't think we're ever going to stop needing it. Well, so-and-so gets 3 or 4 hours of sleep, I heard. Yeah, but you don't really know that person.
Yeah.
Like you don't really have any idea like what is going on, you know, with that person, or what might be, you know, driving that, or what might be enhancing that person, or maybe like, you know, that person might not live as long as, you know, you think. You see? Yeah. So yeah, it's just interesting for me at this point to go through, you know, be combing through a lot of the data and seeing, you know, how basic the answer really is. Yeah. You know?
That's a good point. Let's kind of finish up on hypertrophy. Sure. Like some of the things that you found, like for yourself and then clients too, like a lot of the guys, they want to build muscle. And women too nowadays, which I think is really cool, want to put on some muscle in their 40s and all that sort of stuff. So they probably have been training for a little while, so it's a little different context. Where do we kind of launch with that?
I love 10 by 10.
Okay.
I love to start with that. We need to be at, and these are reps and sets. We need to, it is suggested that we work our 10 by 10 reps and sets at 50 to 60% of the 1 rep max. You can just take a 10 rep max easily where you'll pick a movement, i.e. that relatively safe goblet squat, and work up until you can get 10, right? You can't get an 11th one. That's your 10 rep max. We then go 10 sets of that with 2-minute rest in between, and that's generally, you know, that can do the trick.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah, that's one of my go-to. You about to say Poliquin?
Well, he talks about too. So it's kind of similar to that German volume training. Yeah. So I've done that with a lot, like chest and shoulder. It's amazing. Yeah. And you get to like the 6th and 7th, and you're like, oh man, I'm only halfway. Yeah. We got 3 more, so it does some serious.
It is really that simple.
Yeah.
If I have 30 minutes, I'm gonna load that barbell up, 10 by 10 back squat, rest about a minute, mobilize, go home. Mm-hmm. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
You know, that's another thing we run into. Like, people think this stuff takes a bunch of time. It doesn't. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be in a gym for, I'm never in a gym past an hour and 20. And that's got to be a bad session for it to be that long, you know, or something I'm like scared to do, like a 6:30 2K row, right? Hard cardiovascular effort, but I'm like scared about it. So I'm taking like 25 to 30 minutes to warm up. But this stuff doesn't take long. Like duration doesn't equal benefit,
right?
You know, like so that's another thing. But with the German volume training, that's why I like it too, because it's about 30-35 minutes, you know, and you're gone, you know, per movement.
Yeah, and the 8th or 9th set, you can really feel it. You're like, absolutely. Oh my gosh, am I really gonna make it through? Yeah,
absolutely. Awesome. And not only that, well, unfortunately, right? Because I hate like when my legs are like crippled, right? It's like you're down for like 4 days trying to recover.
Yeah, it's a good feeling.
It's a really good feeling, you know. Look, soon to spark growth, you know. So again, that's where like a lot of the 360 approach comes in, right? Because it's not only about the training, but also the steps you take to keep the training good. I.e., I don't know, did you get a drip over there?
We did, yeah. That was awesome.
Yeah.
We recorded it too.
So like, I mean, dude, like, you know, every other week, you know, every 2 weeks, like that stuff is a recovery enhancement, you know? Cryotherapy, I love, you know? Appropriate or adequate supplementation, like all that stuff is, you know, gonna help with like those days after, you know, the GBT or the byproduct of, you know, trying to build muscle.
That's awesome. What are your stance on carbohydrates, like low carb, keto? Do you get into that with people?
I do. My stance is specific, right? I think that carbs shouldn't be as demonized as they are. The brain prefers it. Liver does as well. I mean, we know we don't need carbohydrates to produce glucose, right? But it is preferable, you know, to the body. So it's mainly based on the case and the person, right? Because low carb could be hell, you know, like you get aggy, you know, there are, people don't understand, like there are ramifications behind like removing the preference, you know, of the body. But if you can deal with those, or if you don't have like, you know, a high stress situation already, then I really have no problems with it, you know. I just mainly have, my biggest problem is people thinking like that is the best way to go.
Right.
You know?
Because some guru said it was good, so they got to do it kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, that's my main thing, and that's why I get kind of like, I don't know if it'll show, but I get kind of like, it's a little touchy, you know, with the carbohydrate things. But you know, obviously, yes, I understand the toxic byproducts of insulin and how we, you know, at every meal, you know, we should probably be sub 20 grams, 30 grams of carbohydrate to sort of minimize or control that insulin release, you know, that's going to follow up, you know, with basically any human being that's over about 30 grams, you know, per meal. So there are some things in there, you know, but my approach to the carbohydrates is extremely specific, you know, to the person that I'm dealing with, you know.
That's good.
Yeah, because I just don't like how popular it's become to just cut carbs, you'll be fine. It's like, no, that's not the answer. You know, like I get it, like on both sides, but like I think in most cases it does more damage than help. Be it right then and there, or the time where your body's adjusting to having no carbohydrates at its disposal, or even to the long term where like you you feel like, oh gosh, this was so hard. Like, I don't want to go through that again, you know? So you just go carb crazy.
Yeah, and overdo it and all that.
Right,
yeah.
right. So that is it's going to be a really highly specific thing. And if I did choose, which I have before, made a decision to advise low carbohydrate situation, like, I have to be all over that.
Yeah.
You know, doctor, she has to be all over that, you know? And it's a lot, you know, for the benefit, but it has worked great, you know, in some cases. It's just one of those things where I'm really cautious about it because it's too popular, and it's something that I think it's one of those things where people use it to express their self-destructive behaviors, you know? It's like, just like in the gym where you think you have to come in there and just kill yourself every day. It's like, no, dude, like it doesn't work that way. Like, we don't have to like make this put you in a state of deprivation. We're looking to regulate, you know?
Yeah.
So that's my thing. I hope that made sense.
No, that's good.
The carbohydrate stuff, man. But I get really, I'm really, I don't want to say frustrated, but I'm really concerned about, you know, the direction and the way people are looking at carbohydrate intakes, you know, around.
Right. Two final questions here.
Sure.
Do you have a cheat day, personally?
No.
Okay.
And I'll explain. I believe in doing the work consistently and being direct about what you're doing for, it could take a year. I just had a guy come out of a foundational program, which took him a year, right, of discipline, where, like, you know, we'll have a cheat day or something like that to appease you psychologically. But once you get out of that foundational phase, of his length, right, and he's gotten a goal where we can specify, I don't think we should look at this stuff as a cheat day. I think it should be viewed as, this action is going to elicit this consequence. This is what I can do to fix it and move forward. Yeah. But I personally, I don't subscribe to cheat days. I mean, you think I'm gonna schedule like ice cream with my 5-year-old kid on a cheat day? No. If we're in Disney World, guess who's having ice cream with his kid? This guy, you know? But the idea is, I've done the consistent directed work the whole year. So you think like that week's gonna throw me off? Negative.
Right. That's a good point. So be consistent, and so you can better buffer.
Focus on the consistency, right? Get as far away from the old habits that you used to demonstrate as you can, and then don't think about a cheat day. You know, you want to view this as, this action is going to cost me this. So this is what I'm going to have to do here, you know? Again, like you can't really tell the guy whose livelihood depends on dinners, all right, look, you can't ever drink again.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude. You got to pick one day and have a drink. It's like, dude, like,
I'm taking clients out every
work.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be able to afford you. You know, like, so, but you can tell them, hey, listen, like, let's make sure we don't drink after 7, right? Let's make sure you're in bed at a reasonable hour if possible. Let's make sure you have a glass of water with each drink. Let's make sure these are not cocktails. You know, let's pick from 1, 2, 3, 4 and operate accordingly. Let's also make sure you're up bright and early and, you know, we're doing something physically, you know, kind of thing, you know? So I tend to look at, that's how I want to look at the food as well. I think when you make it a thing, it stays a thing. I think we should just deal with actions and consequences and how to fix them.
Yeah. Awesome. Brilliant tip. So what aspect about fat loss, hypertrophy, motivating clients do you know now that you wish you would have known 5 years ago when you kind of got into this? Like, is there one thing you're like, oh man, if I just, that was like a breakthrough, an aha moment. Does anything come to mind? I
think, oh wow. You know, the thing that's driven me to, you know, seek out best and the best information has been that for most, the gym is a very small part of fixing the problem. You know, like there's so, I mean, okay, what do we got, 168 hours in a week? You know, let's say you train every day for an hour, right? That leaves 161 hours, right? And you know, maybe on average let's say 7 times 7 will give us 49 out of the 112. Was that 112 that leaves us?
Yeah.
That's 112 hours to like undo what you did in like each hour of training. So I think I went through a lot my first year and maybe even my second year not fully grasping that, you know? Like I didn't start reaching out until to the medical field and like the doctors I have relationships with until I really got an understanding about endocrine function and training recovery, you know? So, and what led up to that was having people come in and they were working really hard, they were really focused, but the reps, sets, protocols weren't helping as much as I thought they would. So I sat and I just said, you know, there's got to be something more to this. Oh, let's look at the hormones. Cool. I started working on that stuff. I did a lot of, actually, speaking of Poliquin, the biosignature course was great. Dr. James Laval was teaching a level 2 at that time. And he taught us how to read blood work. And he just spent 2 days just hammering down, you know, endocrine function to us, which was definitely one of those moments where, you know, I felt like I had went up another level, but I didn't realize that stuff when I started. You know, I thought, oh wow, you just come into a gym and you do what you're supposed to do, and you know, maybe you eat a lot of protein and you're fine. But it's so much more than that. I learned by like the 3rd year that I knew I had to seek out, like, you know, other things, you know, in order to. So I guess the realization that it's so much more than what you're going to do in a gym, which is necessary. Like, that is also a needed stimulus, but it's got to be a 360 approach in order to optimize the individual, you know? Like, another tip I'll just say before we go is we don't want the people we work with to be okay or good enough. We want people in an optimal state, you know? And there's a huge difference between normal and optimal. Just look at the resting heart rate, normal numbers. 60 beats a minute, I believe, all the way up until 100. That's crazy. That's just weird to me. So you can be at 98 and they're like, oh, you're normal, you know? And I'm like, no, when you go in, find out what is optimal and let's aim for that. So the 360 approach allows us to optimize human beings who will then in turn around and do whatever they do that much better, right? If it's a guy who's a CEO of a company, guess what? He's going to treat his employees a lot better. Those employees are going to go home and have better family lives, you know? Those families, those children are going to grow up to be an even better generation. So all these things, like, start with the one person being open enough to do the work to get them in an optimal state.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Point.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah. The ripple effect of health throughout society and families.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I read a statistic earlier this year where the country is more obese than ever, but they're finding that less people are actually doing something about it. And the scientists couldn't figure out why. So all they could come up with was it's being normalized.
More tolerable, tolerated. And,
right? It's okay for you to just feel like, oh, I'm just getting old. No, that's not it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's important that we start to bring this stuff, you know, to the forefront and let people know, like, you don't have to feel that way. You don't have to live your life that way. Like, there are things and there are people like that, this stuff that you can do, you know, to improve everything. You know, I walk out of here, it's like electric. You know, I go meet somebody outside. Hey, you brighten up their day. You know, they go brighten up their day. Like, it's all interconnected. Like, this is everybody's problem.
Right.
You know, so hopefully, you know, we can make a gigantic impact before it's our time to leave this earth. You know, and move it on for generations to come.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Ed Napper, really appreciate you coming on the show.
Mike.
So if folks want to connect with you, what's the best resource for that?
You can find some of my work on ednapper.com. You can reach me at napper.ed@gmail.com. And yeah, those are the two main ones
Links
at this time.
Yeah, and I'll put your Instagram below in the description of this video.
I am Ed Napper on Instagram.
Cool.
Yes.
All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And as I mentioned before, I'll put the links in the description of the video. Thanks for tuning in.